John Prolly, John Watson, the Radavist. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to take a trip down the memory lane of the early days of the content revolution in cycling of like 2010s of the 2010s. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also excited to hear about more about you from a personal side. So thank you for coming on today.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I guess maybe so like I said, there's you were kind of an integral part, very much an integral part in kind of the content revolution in cycling that took place in the 2010s. And we'll dive more into that. But just to give people a background, you started your blog, Probably is not probably.com, and which became, and your pseudonym was John Prolly, and then you became the Radavist after that and started the Radavist content blog. But I think we'll get into all that in a second. Maybe we can kind of go back to the beginning, kind of hear about your origin story a little more, how you got into photography, how you got into cycling, all that good stuff. So, man, tell us about yourself, like where you
Yeah.
got started.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should start with like when I started riding bikes, right? Because that's kind of like the genesis of anyone that is in bike media is so yeah, I mean, I grew up in North Carolina in a small beach town called Wrightsville Beach slash Wilmington, which was kind of like where they filmed Sleeping with the Enemy and like The Crow and even like the Ninja Turtles movies. So it was like a Hollywood influenced kind of surfer bum skater party town college vibe. When the waves were going off, I didn't have a car, so I would just literally ride like this beach cruiser with like a surf rack to the beach. Later I got into mountain biking in the 90s and rode in the Pisgah a lot, which was way different back then than it is now. Asheville and Brevard and that whole zone was just way more kind of like rural and cutty and wasn't as polished and clean and filled with microbreweries like it is. And I went to architecture school and did a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture degree. And to kind of like blow off steam during the crazy architecture student hours, I would ride my mountain bike on these kind of like campus built trails around University of North Carolina. So it was kind of like just cycling for me at that time was better than going to a gym. Like if I was indoors all day working in architecture, I didn't want to go sit on a treadmill or something like that. And I really, I've just had a lifelong fascination with nature and reptiles and amphibians and weird animals and stuff like that. So fast forward to after I spent some time in the Netherlands and in Europe after architecture school, trying to figure out what I wanted out of life, which was essentially like a car-free lifestyle where I could ride my bike anywhere and design buildings for, not only the community of certain places, but also like high-end residential. I really just was kind of enthralled with the work of like Peter Zumthor and Herzog and de Meuron and OMA and all these really just amazing architects that we had studied in school. And I wanted to do work like that because you spend basically every waking minute of your life when you're in architecture studying these buildings. And so I didn't really have the capacity to move to Europe. Like I paid for my own school, like student loans and all that stuff. So New York City was like the best thing, next best thing for me. So after spending some time in North Carolina working at a local office and having to deal with like the Southern good old boy and like the super kind of just racist like institutions there, I moved to New York, had a pretty good portfolio, won a few thesis awards in school, had a dean's list academic record and all this stuff. So got a job real easily in New York because I knew the true dimensions of a 2x4. And so much like architecture school, I use cycling to kind of like blow off steam. So I would ride my bike in every day to work, to the office, and the fixed gear track bike thing was really blowing up then. And So I
So
was
we're
spending the weekends. Uh, yeah, I was spending the
so,
weekends kind of going through and just what's up?
oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, so we're talking, this is like the early, like 2007, 8, or what time frame? Give us a period.
Oh yeah, 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 totally. Sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
so this I moved to New York in like 2005.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah. I graduated from school, spent a little time, and then basically moved straight to New York City. Um,
And there was
so
some
that, yeah,
fixed
like
there was some fixed gear kind of rumblings bubbling up in the city that you were seeing.
yeah, I mean, track bikes and fixed gears had been a thing in New York since like the 70s. It was like a lot of bike messengers were riding them, but I had honestly never even seen someone riding one in the street. Like what in my stay in the Netherlands, I went to Belgium because I, loved Eddie Merckx and that kind of stuff. And the hour record and just velodrome racing in general to me was like this super minimal, beautiful thing. And then suddenly you're seeing these guys like gliding through the streets just symbiotically with the chaos of the traffic and these illegal alley cat races that were being thrown, and there was all this stuff that was happening around bikes in New York and no one was covering it. It's not like traditional bike media gives a shit about some Jamaican guy riding an Eddie Merckx. It's just not, the I think these like tiny street cultural pockets that happen aren't really something that people can sell or like package or market. And
Sure.
so there's just not a lot of bike media. And that continues today. Stuff doesn't
Sure.
become part of the cultural zeitgeist until it becomes marketable, late capitalism for real. But so I just started like literally documenting this street culture of alley cat races and art openings and like everything that was going on in New York at the time. I was riding like my bike to work every day, and then on the weekends, go out with friends and shooting videos of us riding these kind of like big burly fixed gears that were kind of more akin to a mountain bike than they were like the track bike predecessor. And just kind of like, I grew up watching 401 video magazine, which was like a skateboarding series, and all the Tum Yeto, jump off a building, toy machine, welcome to hell. Like these are all things that are ingrained in me in terms of like my kind of aesthetic choice. So we were trying to kind of copy that style a little bit and document this track bike fixed gear thing.
So tell me
So
more.
yeah,
Tell me more. What were some of the cultural? Now that you're talking about this, like what were some of the cultural staples of that time? We've got the track bike. We've got. I'm assuming Monster Track, the fixed
yeah,
gear, Alley Cat race is
yeah,
something. Tell me about some other. And it sounds like you had a real kind of, you saw the beauty in it and the grittiness, and I think maybe Chrome Industries feels like it could be thrown in there.
yeah,
Some
yeah.
other.
Reload. Yeah,
Tell,
yeah, yeah. I mean, this was like just like hip hop, East Coast had its own style, and Chrome wasn't really part of that. Chrome was more like kind of San Francisco based stuff. Chrome did a good job of like addressing the needs of like bike messengers and also the people that were like, I hate the term poser or whatever, but like guys riding to their office on track bikes, i.e., me. Like Chrome was making great like kind of commuter stuff. But this was just like frame builders in Brooklyn building like track bikes and big burly street bikes and like randonnées and Johnny Coast and Seth Roscoe were like some of the first guys that I was documenting as frame builders, because I love people that make things in their garages and in their shops and still produce things in the U.S. The metal race was another really cool one that was thrown by this guy named Tom, and each of the checkpoints was like a different graveyard in the city, and the
oh
map
wow.
made like a big pentagram, and we're like racing through the streets with corpse paint on and like old Dark Throne t-shirts. And I'm really into metal and have been into metal like my whole life, so it's
Heavy
like kind of
metal
cool,
music. Okay.
just like
And
black metal and doom metal and death metal and stuff like that. But yeah, so really it was like just documenting these events and documenting these people that were making the events happen. And there were, New York City, just it's a city filled with so many different styles and aesthetics, and then you throw the popular fad of cycling into it, and it just like explodes with vibrancy and colors. And you know, that it's funny to like talk about like diversity and diverse communities in like the modern context, but like places like New York City and San Francisco and Toronto like have always had these really diverse, vibrant cultures. And as a white guy from the South that grew up in North Carolina, like I kind of felt at home being in these spaces. And you know, so I just continued doing this blog like part time on the weekends, and then the economy burst in 2008,
So tell me,
and I lost my architecture job.
this was Probably Is Not Probably, or what was it called initially?
Yeah, yeah. This was Probably Is Not Probably. That nickname is a long-winded story that is not even worth going into. But yeah,
Okay, maybe another
so
episode.
yeah, maybe another episode. It's a whole thing. But yeah, and so I just, you know, 2008 hit, the economy tanked, architecture just completely hit the you know bottom of the financial barrel. I couldn't get a job anywhere because one of the byproducts of New York City's architecture community is that it's essentially run by trust fund kids who went to like Columbia and Harvard and that can work for free because their parents are loaded. And
Sure.
so people like me who grew up in like lower income houses, like you know, families, like, and
Working
that were
class.
paying for school, yeah, working class just couldn't afford to live that lifestyle. So I was getting job offerings for like 18 grand a year to be a senior project designer. So which is impossible. So I think I went on Twitter at the time and was just like, I can't find a job. I don't want to leave New York, yada, yada, yada. And some brand hit me up and was like, hey, have you ever tried to sell an ad on your website before? We'd buy an ad. And then, you know, as soon as one ad pops up, more ads pop up. And suddenly I was making better money doing this culture blog website on cycling than I was a senior project manager for a high-end Manhattan architecture office, which is a sad state of, you know, architecture and also just kind of, again, capitalism. Um, but yeah, and then I realized that I felt like I had done all that I could do in New York. At this time in my life as a cyclist, like I was already doing, you know, kind of like cutty urban like campouts, like loading like a Caritas bag on my road bike and driving down or riding down to Philly, taking like these like little towpaths and like kind of inner city single track. And we'd camp somewhere along, you know, a little canal or whatever and ride in Philly for the weekend. Or a lot of times we would do this like before the Philly Bike Expo and then ride back to New York. And it was just like a cool way to like travel around by bike, especially in the Northeast, because there's so many little interconnected communities. So I really just, you know, I was missing living somewhere with like better access to trails. And I think I'd gone down to visit my friends in Austin, Texas, in like 2009, and was like, you know what, I'm just going to move to Austin because it has mountain biking, it has road cycling, it's whatever, it's a little more Western. So moved to Austin, continued doing what I was doing, which was like documenting mountain biking, road cycling. We were going out on little bike overnighters and camping trips on our bikes and shooting a lot of film and just kind of, you know, really just trying to showcase like everyday cyclists and using their bikes, ranging from brand new touring bikes to like, you know, vintage Miatas, and just really trying to like stoke people out on getting out on their bikes.
So this was after, what was this, 2010, 2011? Are we
Yeah,
talking?
that's about 2010. Yeah.
Okay, so can we back up though? I spoke
Yeah.
with Juliet Elliott. Do you know Juliet?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So she had a similar story with her blog called Bikes and Stuff, which she kind of had a similar path. She came more from communications, where you came from architecture. But can you tell us, like, so you were just documenting this track bike kind of underground culture, being around New York, and you were putting it up on your blog, probably.com. And at first it was just something that you were doing because you liked it, and you were just doing video or imagery, or both?
All photo. Yeah. I
Photo.
mean, we were shooting videos, like kind of edits, but it was more like shot with like, you know, early GoPros or like whatever, like cameras that are not as good as your iPhone, basically, just like super lo-fi stuff, but primarily photo because I took photography classes in architecture school, and photography is such a large, it's such a, it's part of the design elements in architecture. You know, you're designing for space and light, and so that's kind of like why we can get into this in a little bit, but that's why my photos are the way they are, which is like super compressed, shot with a 200 millimeter lens, like really flat elevations of details. So yeah, that kind of like that, everything in my life has been inspired by my 5 years of education and like the places I've lived, and like my, even my childhood fascinations with like animals and stuff like that. So it's like, it's pretty funny to look back on my life's work at this point. But yeah, the early 2000s were, well, the 2010 like era was this really great time in cycling, because it was, you know, pre-social media, and there were really just like a few really big cycling websites, and there, which opened up for a lot of people, like, you know, like Juliet and all these like different people to have these different blogs kind of talking about the same thing at the same time, and made for a really cool community. And to see where everyone has gone over the years has been really, really great. You know, I'm 42 now, and yeah, it's been like 18 years of this stuff. So
No,
yeah.
it's great, and it's so fun because so it's like charting the path. So you had this fascination you had to document, right?
Yeah.
And no one else was documenting it in this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so then you moved to, so you had this blog and you began to monetize it, you said, through some advertising, because you know you had a kind of a critical mass, and someone just kind of tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, you ever thought about monetizing this? And it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really truly believe in the bottom of my heart that like the only like true passion comes from the desire for an individual to like document their community, and like anyone that wants to start something strictly to make money just won't cut it, in my opinion.
No, you're
Like
right.
it's
You're right. If
you
Yeah,
know,
because
especially in the bike industry.
people can smell it, man. People can smell
Yeah.
it. And that's so great you said that. So you decided to move from New York to Austin, and can you run through that again? Why? Like, what were the reasons? Probably cost of living, I imagine, was one.
Yeah, cost of living at the time was like ridiculous. Like I was living in Greenpoint in like a basement apartment and spending like $1,800 a month, which literally was like all of the money I was making from ads at the time. I think I was pulling in like $2,400 a month at that point. Um, so yeah, and you know, my I just had a lot of friends in Austin. It just seemed like a really cool place. Like people call it the Velvet Rut, because you could literally like live in a house with like two other people for like $400 a month, split between, you know, three ways, and just get a bar back job if you wanted to. And then there's a big BMX community, there's dirt jumps, there's mountain biking in the green belt, there's lots of swimming and natural springs and pools, and it's just this really sweet, or it was at the time, this really sweet small community of cyclists, from like pedicabbers to bike polo to like fixed gear kids to, you know, we were doing like a lot of cyclotouring and bike camping and gravel riding, or whatever you want to call it, and and I really miss mountain biking. And so I got an IndyFab Deluxe Redux, which was like a rigid 29er, and just started riding the greenbelt. And actually, Lance Armstrong tried to drop me on a straightaway once, and I totally dusted his ass. And then he came into Mellow Johnny's complaining that some guy on a rigid Indy Fab beat him, and everyone knew it was me. So that was kind of cool. But you know, but yeah, you know, Austin.
I'm trying to get Lance on the show. He's my
Oh
unicorn.
man, yeah, no, yeah, yeah. It's, you know, and Austin's funny, man. It's total, like when I was moved, like when I moved there, it was a totally different place than it is now. It's always very like Texas in general is just like athleticism and like competition, and that's not really my vibe. And so I was like trying to get these like roadies that were like racing to go out on these bike tours, and it's like you're like riding a touring bike out on some dirt road way out in the middle of nowhere in like north central Texas, and like suddenly these guys start sprinting, and you're like, what the fuck, what are you guys doing? And
They're
there's like a
racing.
county line.
Yep.
Yeah, they're like racing, and it's like I remember this one guy, John Trujillo, who's like a really strong road racer. just started sprinting for this county line sign, and this jar of salsa just goes flying out of one of his panniers and like breaks on the road, and like that was like our only salsa for the weekend, and everyone's like bummed, and but it's just kind of like a funny anecdote. But yeah, and then eventually, I mean, the crazy thing was this was 2010 in Austin.
Yep.
Come 2014, it was more expensive to live there than it was to live in Los Angeles, which is where I moved next.
Okay.
I
So
and Los Angeles seems like like it seems like a weird thing that LA would be cheaper than Austin, but tech had really blown up in Austin. A lot of the Houston kind of Dallas oil money had moved in, and housing was going through the roof. And I was going to Los Angeles and California in general a lot for just shooting bike culture stuff, mountain biking, gravel riding. It wasn't even called gravel then. It was just riding your cyclocross bike on single track and fire roads. And then still doing a lot of like bike tours. And so I was like, sometimes I was flying to California like 3 times a month. And I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to move there. And I moved there and just started again, just continuously documenting bike culture, shooting a lot of bike portraits, which I think like if I'm known for anything, it's probably like bicycle photography and documentation. Like I'm, and it's the one thing that I can say with confidence that no one can touch my abilities on, and that it's been copied and emulated. And I see websites all the time shooting bikes the way that I shoot them, and which is great, to inspire people. But I can shoot a bike and document it and talk about it a lot faster than probably most people. And I think that comes a little bit from my architectural background, just looking at scale and detail and understanding the fabrication process and what certain lines mean to a bike's handling and the way that I set the bike up to shoot it. You can kind of get an idea of the geometry and how it's going to ride. And these are all things that no one, and I mean that with like confidence, like no bike website was doing to the extent that I was doing. And to see everyone in this space now doing that, it just, I started that stuff. And it sounds a little arrogant to say it like that, but it's like
no, I know
I've been doing.
that's no, that's why we're here. I mean, I wouldn't have I
Yeah,
reached out to you because there was a moment in time, and so this was the year that you moved to California was 2012, 2013. No, before
2015. Yeah.
2015. Okay, because you came onto my radar when I started working with Chinelli, kind of freelancing for Chinelli, and your blog was considered for a brand like Chinelli was sort of at the edge of kind of cool, fun, hip.
Yeah.
For like a brand that was kind of in the know, John Prolly was the place you wanted to be, and you had
Yep.
tons of authority. And I guess I want to know, like, what was that like? Because you really did. I think you hit something. You hit some oil. I mean, we can say that. Like, you were able to mix Instagram, your photography skills, because people don't know this now, but in 2013 when Instagram came out, um, bike brands didn't know how to be on Instagram. Nobody knew how to be on Instagram. Like they
Well,
had
because
no.
you could only post photos from your cell phone. Like you couldn't even upload photos on Instagram until like 2015 or something, or like 2 or 3 years later. Yeah, no one knew how to. I mean, I didn't know how to do it. I hated it. Like I only did it because I was like, kind of like Twitter. I felt like I needed to be on it. Um,
but your
but
but
yeah,
your
well,
skill was with photography. I think another person that was part of this was Mike Martin from MASH,
oh yeah, totally.
which was had a photography. He was a professional photographer. Like he did big time photography work.
Yeah,
And then I think David Trimble was able to kind of channel some of that. David Trimble with Red Hook Crit was able to channel some of that kind of stoke energy, uh, but like elegance of it,
yeah,
rawness and elegance mixed really well. And the bike industry like had no idea what was going on.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a very valid observation that and not to be the old man screaming at a cloud or yelling at a cloud or whatever, like the Simpsons meme, but yeah, I mean, it was just different back then. And so like, I mean, and also like kind of around 2013, I started feeling like I was tired of the website just being my voice. I mean,
You
as you
already
can
started
imagine,
feeling that then.
yeah, I was like, I don't, I'm kind of just over this. Like, regardless to what you might think, I don't really like being in the limelight. I like being behind the camera. I obviously have opinions about bikes, and I'm not afraid to state those opinions, but like, I kind of don't like being the center of attention. I really liked our audience and the conversations we were having and the people I was meeting. And, like I documented like ultra romance. Like I was like shooting lots of stuff with Benedict and we were having fun. And Matt from Crust Bikes, like I met him before Crust Bikes was even a brand and he just had this prototype evasion and just all these things and all these people. And I was like, man, these people have way more to say than I do. I hate writing. I'm much more of a visual person. Obviously, and I read a lot, but trying to find my voice took a long time. So I just was like, you know what? I like this idea of like radicalized bike culture, but like the word rad is just kind of like overdone in a lot of ways. And I really love this idea of atavism. There was a Jocko Whalen book that was he was a pro skater and he wrote about like the inherent nature of things to play and this like atavistic urge. And we had done a video project like years before with Seth Roscoe and Johnny Coast, and it was called the atavistic urge. And so I was like, well, what about if I called this like site, because I really wanted to rebrand my site too, because like Prolly's not probably like looks stupid on a t-shirt. The logo is like an old Viking, just based on like my kind of Finnish like heritage or whatever. And I was like, I want to do something like that transcends cycling, right? I want to have a brand. Most importantly, I can do the storytelling, I can do the photos. I need a brand. And when I was living in Austin, I knew these guys at this ad agency, or they wasn't even an ad agency. They were like two motorcycle dudes that like just drew stuff for big brands. And the company's called Land, and they did like the Ace Hotel branding stuff for Polar, Madre Mezcal, Old Pal, which is like a weed company, and like they just had this like very interesting folk arty like inspired hand style. And so we literally came up with this logo,
Which
which
is, what is it?
it's just I call it a jackal because that's like the easiest thing, but it's a made up animal. It's a
Okay.
set. It's based off of like older like Grim. There's a Grim fairy tale illustration that had this like weird, like kind of like jackal lion dog looking thing with a long tail. And I was like, that's just really cool. Like, let's just do something like that. Let's
But
make up
this
an
was,
animal.
but this was your life. This was your
Yeah.
lifeblood. I mean, this was everything that like
Yeah.
all your income, all you worked
Yeah.
for. And did you have a family at the time?
No, no. I mean,
No,
I was
single.
at,
Okay.
yeah,
So,
single. Yeah.
and
Yeah. And
so,
so I came
uh,
up with the word radavist, which is
yeah,
radical atavism. Yeah.
and
And
so, and you're taking this whole like everything you've got, and you're gonna just switch it. I mean,
yeah,
was it scary?
no,
It wasn't. Okay.
because I
You
knew
believed it.
what we yeah, I knew what we were doing was relevant. I knew it honestly, it's still the best looking branding in the bike industry. Like it, and it's still the thing that you'll see people wearing this hat that don't even ride bikes that just like the way it looks,
Sure.
which is the success, the telling of success. And then you'll see all the similar websites that have popped up like straight up copying our logo without understanding the context, or they still have to put like a crank arm on it or something because they don't get the concept, like they failed art school or something. But it's like, in architecture you learn these things, and you learn about intention, and intentionality is something that is really important at not only kind of helping you figure out like what to do, so like a party, a model, a sketch, like it later informs the entire design process. And so this intentionality was like, create a brand, create good branding, have a unique name so that you can get the Instagram handle and the website URL and like all that stuff and the trademarks. And I don't want to have a website ever that says like bike or cycling or anything in it, because it kind of just limits you. Like, why not design for future expansion and freedom?
Sure.
And think about like what the cultural zeitgeist is, where in this moment it's going to be completely different in 20 years in the bike industry. So like the Radavist has has an ability to morph and change and adapt
I get it.
and mutate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But if you call it like, you know, gravel riding in North America.com or something like that, like no one's,
No, no, I get it.
yeah.
I get it. But there
Yeah.
is something to be said about niching down.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. I mean, and I've figured that out. Like yeah, I mean, SEO is not favorable for us. Like
I could
we
see
have to
that.
do a lot
I could see that.
to yeah. But it's, I mean, obviously this is like a life of like learning. And yeah, so I basically flipped the switch on April 1st, like 2014, yeah, I think 2014. Everyone just kind of like lost their shit. We initially just displayed the logo for the day leading up to the switch, and people thought that we had gotten hacked, which was pretty funny. Like, I'm a lawyer representing media companies, and I can help you get your website back. And I was like, with that kind of stuff. We launched these hats, which, again, it's not a cycling cap; it's a lifestyle hat. We launched shirts with the logo. Again, no bikes. I don't. We've maybe done like maybe 2 shirts total that had an actual bicycle on them, and we just started hitting really hard with merch. No one was doing this in bike media. Like, you didn't go to like bikenews.com or whatever website and buy a bikenews.com t-shirt. Like, it was, especially a bikenews.com t-shirt that didn't have a bike on it. It's like this weird fucked up looking animal that we made. And yeah, but like the kind of like the definition of like the what the site was has changed so much over time.
What was it was
But
rubber side up. Rubber side up was the
yeah, that was the motto. Yeah.
that
And
was the
it's like
motto.
having to explain that to people and they're like, I don't get it. And you're like, okay, so time to change that. And
But you
so
see,
living in
I love how you're flexible. Like you're flexible.
yeah,
You seem to be kind of a student of, like, you really seem to be passionate about creating content, but creating a package. Like, you're very intent about how you build it. That's really interesting. You said, okay, we had this motto, but not, sounds like you changed it because you were listening to the people.
yeah. Yeah, it's like, what if you have to explain something every time to people, like it's
Not working.
pointless to
Yep.
keep. So I was like, well, whatever, let's get rid of that. And at the time, like, I was, you know, there's really no public land in Texas. And so once I moved to California and started going out to the Mojave Desert a lot more and started working with trail organizations, building mountain bike trails, and really started like talking to these people about like the representation of mountain biking. I was just like, man, like, tread lightly. That makes way more sense. That embodies our ethos on the site, which is sustainable travel by bicycle. It's catchy. It sounds familiar, like tread lightly. Like, it kind of like talks about the relationship between hiking and like backpacking and even car camping. It's like, you can, all these things, like, you have to be aware of like your impact and how it affects others and the environment and all that stuff. So Shred Lightly became the new logo. I really started hitting the deserts and the high kind of like mountainous terrain in California hard because I really hated living in Los Angeles. So I was gone like every weekend doing something, or sometimes just for like a month, like out in Death Valley and the Mojave and the Inyo, and going out into Nevada, and just really these dry and arid places were really like my thing. And that's kind of like where my wife Carrie and I like really started to like solidify our love for each other, and also just like our love for this just the weird folk art stuff that you see in the deserts and these old maps and books we were reading and about places to go and things to see, and like hot spring guides from the 70s and like Jeep routes that actually turn out to be quite like awesome bike touring routes. And so we started doing these big gnarly bike tours in Death Valley, and in the Inyo National Forest, and just kind of everywhere. And I just realized that like I'm just much happier living in small places with easy access to the outdoors. And so in 2019, I just had this like nagging sensation that like something was going to hit the fan and we were going to get stuck in LA. And I was like, we really wanted to move to Santa Fe, which is where I live today. Carrie's family's got roots here. I
Okay.
love the ease of access to the outdoors, low population density. There's 80,000 people here. Like I can pedal from my door and ride up to 12,500 feet if I want to. And
Yeah, there's
it's
mountains
awesome.
there's
So,
mountains in Arizona that a lot of people don't know that. In New Mexico, I'm sorry.
oh, this is New Mexico.
Yeah, in New Mexico.
Yeah, yeah.
There's mountains,
Well, I
and
mean,
a lot of people
yeah,
don't know that.
yeah, yeah. They
And so,
think of Breaking Bad and they think it's all like arroyos and burnt out cars and stuff. Yeah.
so I guess
But yeah, I mean, we're in the Rockies.
can we go
Yeah.
back to, I guess I'm curious to know, like, what did the organization look like from maybe the point you started the rat, because you have it like, maybe just to fill people in. I mean, it's a blog. It continued to be a blog from probably, it's not probably to the Radavist. So it's, you're building content, you're receiving content from brands, showcasing cool, interesting stuff with kind of your own editorial spin on it. But what did the organization look like? Like, what did you have, like, investment you had to make on people? And I mean, tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, so first of all, it was me doing everything, which
Until
is a lot. And then
until when? Ever the whole time? No,
yeah, yeah.
you
It
never
was
hired
literally
anyone. You've never hired
never
anyone.
hired it. I couldn't afford to pay people what the amount of work that is required to do this stuff. Like, so yeah, like basically what my business model was, if we go there, was, sell banner ads
Sure.
to companies,
Yep.
you know, generate income,
Right.
and then pay contributors. We didn't really get stories from brands because, like, again, I just don't think brands are capable of telling stories because
So
they're
so
first.
you weren't about, like, I'm talking about Bike Rumor, okay? Because I
Yeah,
interviewed Tyler, and
yeah,
I'm friends with Tyler, great guy, and he would just he it was just a machine where he would just be talking about tech in
yeah,
just like at scale almost. And so he had a
yeah,
team. He had a team because it was about the volume. You were not doing that.
yeah.
You don't do that.
Well, we were doing volume just in a different capacity. Like, again, like referencing back to what I said earlier, with like, if you get into something to make money, like people are going to smell it.
Of
And
course.
also not how I operate. So like for me, it was not so much telling the brand story, but like the individuals in the community that were doing cool stuff. So I think the longest running contributor we have is this guy Ryan Wilson, who's been living off of his bike in South America and Central Asia for the past like 10 years. And
You have contributors
speaking,
then. You have
yeah,
contributors.
yeah, lots of contributors. Yeah.
How
So,
many?
I mean, I don't even know, like 40, 50.
Okay.
You would just, like, I'd wake up on a Monday morning and I'd have like 3 or 4 stories sent in from people. And these are like high quality photo, high quality words, like, impactful stuff. And so I was paying people between 250 and $500 a story. And then I was paying guys like Ryan Wilson a little more because he was bringing something really unique and special to our website. And also, he's living off of his bike. So I want him to continue to be doing that. And I've still been paying him this, like, we're paying him more money now, but yeah, he makes enough
Wow.
money from us doing stories that he can live off his bike.
That's
And,
an interesting
but I've,
it's an interesting model, because it sounds like
yeah,
the value there is obviously your website, your following, your newsletter list, but also these relationships that you have with these contributors.
yeah, totally. I mean, and even just like us talking about small brands, like a bag maker or someone that makes components or hardware, like us pumping those products that I believe in. I'm not doing it for money or anything. It's like I legitimately believe in these products, pushes those individuals to like quit their full-time jobs and like pursue their passion projects full time. And I can't tell you how many companies like I've helped launch just from being really sincere and talking about their product. Same with a lot of contributors, like a lot of like people that have shot for us go on to shoot for the New York Times and stuff like that. And I'm not saying the New York Times reads the Radavist, but like I think we give people a platform to establish their editorial voice and style, which then gives them confidence, and then they can go out and like start nailing some of these bigger fish. So, but yeah, I was just literally doing everything myself. When Carrie and I met 7 years ago, um, she came on and helped me sell ads and helped ship the merchandise,
Okay.
which was huge because I'm horrible with money and I just can't manage doing everything myself. So she was like the first full-time employee. We were dating, it's kind of a thing that happens sometimes, right? Um,
Hopefully.
and yeah, yeah. I mean, like
Uh,
I think she was a photo producer too, so she would really help with photo culling and kind of like photo editing. We were doing commercial shoots where she would produce the shoots and I would shoot them, obviously. So brands were getting like a killer deal because I would only take commercial shoots that had a story, like something going on that was just a little bit different than like shooting some shoes. And then usually like I would just post the story. If I was happy with the photos and the scenery and everything, I would post it on the website. So they were getting so much value add because we had an in-house producer, we had a photographer, me, and a platform to share these stories. And so I know a lot of brands have been really happy about having their photo shoots up on the site over the years, which is great for everyone, I think. um, so yeah, but the cost of living in Los Angeles was getting a little bit too high, and I couldn't live around 10 million people. There's a great community of cyclists there, but I also just hated having to drive every time I wanted to ride my mountain bike. And so, yeah, we got this bug up our butt to like try to find a house in Santa Fe. And in 2019, we basically signed a contract, and then like early 2020 we moved out here, and then like a few weeks later the pandemic hit and it was like full lockdown. And so it's like kind of got out of the city just in time, and but
sure.
then moved to a new place where like everyone is locked down, so it was really hard to meet people or to be social, or and it's honestly still taking me a lot of time to pull myself out of that tendency of riding by myself and doing a lot of stuff by myself here.
So you're still
I
building
went from
that. You're building a community there still.
Yeah, I mean, there's an existing community that's great, and there's a lot of people that have done a lot, from our local trail organization, the Fat Tire Society, to this guy Kevin Hinton does like local overnighters, and there's a few bike shops here that are really doing a great job at like just making a cycling community in a place that doesn't really seem on the surface to be like that great of a place to ride. Like we're at 7,000 feet here, so the winters are pretty gnarly. It's like negative 10 degrees and windy, and then it's really hard to ride here because we're at 7,000 feet. We're higher than Boulder and Denver, and
I
we're
didn't
higher than
realize.
Durango.
I didn't realize Santa Fe
Yeah,
was that high. That is crazy. Higher than
yeah,
Denver.
we're higher than Taos. Like everyone thinks Taos is like in the clouds, and we're higher than Taos. And but like we are surrounded by the southern terminus of the Rocky Mountains. So like there's hundreds of miles of trail that's bike legal, and then there's thousands of miles of trail that's in wilderness. So it's like you're literally, and then there's rivers to raft and fish and like all this stuff, and you're in this affordable place, well, ish at the time, that is super flat in town, but then like goes up to 12.5, and you can ride single track all the way to that. So it's really funny to me how like people from Boulder come here and they're like, we have a local bumper sticker that just says, "I'm from Boulder, so dot dot dot," and like people from Boulder come here and they're like, "Well, I'm from Boulder, so like, I like riding gnarly stuff." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I take them on like this really fucked up trail, and they're just like, "What is this? This isn't even a mountain bike trail. This is a hiking trail." And they get all like flabbergasted, and I'm like, "Yeah, New Mexico's definitely got this like a little bit more rowdy, a little bit more cutty, a little bit more unpolished edges compared to our neighbors in Colorado." But the Southwest, Arizona and New Mexico just have this great style. It's got history. Some of it is really dark and gross history, but and it's got this like really beautifully rendered kind of vernacular with like the adobe houses and all of the kind of like Spanish conquistador era churches and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different. It's cool to run a media company out of here because there's not a billion influencers showing up on every ride taking selfie videos of themselves talking about their new cycling jersey they're wearing. It's just like normal people riding normal bikes, wearing normal clothes, and it's just awesome and true and honest. And we've met some amazing people since moving here that have literally just opened their arms and showed us all the cool stuff that New Mexico has to offer. And yeah, I mean, it's for the first time in my adult life, I feel like we found a home and that I have friends that I can trust, and people that are supportive and really intelligent and smart. I mean, everyone's seen Oppenheimer, I'm sure, and like that shit happened like 20 miles as the crow flies from here. So like our neighborhood has a lot of Los Alamos engineers and scientists in it, and it's like the conversations you have with people really just throw you a curveball because you're like, oh yeah, I forgot, like this, we're in one of the smartest neighborhoods in the country. So
Wow.
which is really cool. But yeah, it's just, now it's like I mountain bike more than I gravel ride. Like I was riding a lot of gravel in LA. So the content has definitely shifted, which I'm sure some people have noticed, which is also just how it has happened since the genesis of this media company. It was like track bikes and fixed gears and urban mobility in New
Sure.
York, then like, touring bikes and cyclocross racing and road bikes in Austin, and then cyclocross slash gravel bikes in LA. And now it's like, now we're in real mountain bike terrain. So you don't want to come to Santa Fe with a gravel bike. You want to come to Santa Fe with a mountain bike.
So it sounds like
So that's kind of
you
like,
you've been able to have your voice, and it's you're like everybody's a content creator now.
yeah, yeah,
Now
yeah.
I'm yelling at the cloud. Everybody's a content creator, but it feels like you really are a professional, veteran, OG content creator, in the purest sense of the word, because you're creating content based on your passion, um, telling a story, with an obviously. I mean, I hear you. You're deliberate about it. You said, I sell merch, I make nice clothing that people want to be part of the community, so I can support myself to have this community, because otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do it. But it is like like you have this really hard edge of a creator that you're able to just kind of infuse, and I think that's what makes it so unique. And like, what are you seeing today? Like, are you having to change your strategy at all to continue to have the quality of life that you want? I mean, are you able to just continue doing what you have always done based on
Yeah,
what's happening
that's
on the platforms with, things? TikTok, I can call TikTok out.
TikTok. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Or I mean, are you having to change?
I mean, there's like, yeah, I would say so. I'd say like if anyone is doing media, it doesn't matter if it's bike media or car media or whatever, like you are changing, you are constantly, and the rate of that change, like the permutations that you go through are much more accelerated. Um, Everything is focusing on the future and like what's next. And like, you get commenters that are like, that literally like try explaining to you what a touring bike is, and you're like, dude, I've been doing this shit for a long time. Like, and people's attention spans are like in the
Sure.
trash.
Yeah.
uh, and like I'm going to be honest here, like we inspired an entire movement in cycling, so everything looks like something we did. Like like the only site that kind of comes close to doing what we're doing has like completely adopted our logos, completely adopted the way we talk about bikes, how we shoot them. And it's like I'm constantly having to, our merch gets straight up copied. So like at one point, Carrie, who's a woman in the bike industry, is like seeing this website copying all of her merch while virtue signaling that they need to support women in cycling. And she's just like screaming at top of her lungs, like, you're copying a woman's design while posting virtue signaling bullshit about like supporting women in the bike industry. And so we're like, okay, fuck it. What they can't do, they can't hit design, they can't hit architecture like we do, they can't hit random nerd references like I doubt they even know who Alexander Gerard is. And like that's my life. Like I love, classic photographers, classic designers, mid-century design. Like all of this stuff is embedded in me and it's influenced my life. And so we're just like, we're going to go for the weird. We're going to do the kooky stuff and just see how it goes and see what sticks at the wall. And at the end of the day, like we're the originators of this bike lifestyle, like cultural blog thing. And like, we're always going to be on top. Like
And
things might waver and things might get shaky. And, but I mean, it's just kind of real, recognize real. And I think we've been doing it long enough to even the people that are cynical or that don't like me will still come to the site just to see what we're doing. And this is where I get in trouble because I just run my mouth and like people don't like opinions. But yeah, I mean, I think we've got some things that are literally being designed right now that I think are gonna really shake this kind of community in a good way, like things that I've been wanting to do but just haven't had the capacity to on my own. And so I'm really looking forward to like the next stage of what this website will become. um and honestly, like I think the thing that's gotten really interesting about the bike industry is that the bigger brands are suffering right now and the smaller brands are picking up the slack. And so with that, you get these accelerated design and kind of versions of bikes, right? So like a company like Esker, it's a really small mountain bike company, can make a bike that addresses the specific community it serves needs a lot faster than a company like Trek or Specialized that has to go through the gauntlet of board meetings and stuff like that. So I think you're seeing this kind of like get out in the woods with your dirtbag friends, do some drugs, have some fun. Who cares about how fast you made the climb? Who cares about how fast you descended the descent? Let's just get out and get back to the roots of mountain biking, like Wendy Cragg was documenting in the late 70s and early 80s. Because that's what I think people want most of all is community, and they want to feel like they're part of something. So create this venue, or at least change the venue to
no, I get it.
address the
Like
community.
I get it, man. Like you've got this is these are the values. Your values are, to create and to kind of explore this kind of weird, interesting stuff. And it seems to be working, man. And I hope it continues. I wanted to ask you, I read that in 2021 that you partnered with the Pros Closet. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that? Like what brought that about?
Yeah, I mean, it was they were, I think, like the fourth company that offered to buy us in about 3 years. And they were the first company to give us like a legitimate offer that acknowledged that when you're a small business owner, you essentially write off everything. So when you look at your P&L report on paper, if you're bringing in $20,000 a year, like you're not worth anything really. And in terms of a traditional M&A acquisition model, which relies on either, for those that don't know, and this isn't really talked about a lot, an M&A model traditionally lies around a 3x or a 4x purchase. So your bottom line, like what you net every year, is multiplied by 3 or 4, and that gives you what your company is worth. So, and then on top of that, you add in your salary, your 401k, any bonus, like all the stuff that just comes into like being an employee for the purchasing entity. So we got an offer from TPC, that the Pros Closet, that was great. It
And where are
promised.
they from? Where are they based?
They're out of Louisville, Colorado, which is like a kind of sub community of Boulder. And they started basically, Nick Martin, the founder, started basically going around to ex professional cyclists and buying their old bikes and then selling stuff on eBay. And so now their business model is certified pre-owned bicycles, and then also components and accessories, and overstock stuff. Like if Specialized orders 3,000 kits of SRAM GX and then they can't get frames or whatever, TPC will buy that overage and sell it as like OE packaged, like kind of like white label or gray label stuff. So but the tendency of e-commerce sites to grow a media branch internally has been like a trend, a growing trend in the kind of like VC backed world. So they were like, we have X number of dollars to grow this like media branch of the Pros Closet, or we can just buy a media company. And honestly, they've done a great job at like letting us continue to do our thing and just leaning on us for like special edition bike models and like media stories and stuff like that. And I think that's where TPC got it right, is they know that the Radavist has a dedicated following that has a voice in the industry, and if you start really heavily handedly like over trying to sell your company on a site platform like that, like the traffic's going to die and the people are going to leave. And so they've actually like given very little feedback in terms of like how we operate day to day. I have like a bi-weekly meeting with a manager, and he's just like, yeah, your traffic's looking good. Like this piece did really well. Sweet. And then we have like, a Pros Closet ad at the top of the page. And then we sell some Radavist edition Sklar bikes that we have listed on our content. You wouldn't even really tell that if you come into the website the first time that like we're owned by a corporation, which I think is great, because we're still very community based and very focused on smaller companies and stuff like that. So
You sold 100% of the business.
yeah, yeah.
And why did you
And
do that? Why?
honestly, because I've been doing it for like 16 years by myself and was completely burnt out, and we could not afford to hire a full-time editor, which in my opinion, a full-time editor should be making between $70,000 and $100,000 a year. And I'm not one of these people that can like look someone in the face and be like, work for exposure
Yeah,
or like,
right.
whatever. Like I need to be able to like treat people like humans.
So
And I
you
know
didn't
that's like
have
a
you
thing.
didn't you didn't have the gross margin to hire someone and then continue to have a salary. So you were like, like I can't do this in terms of like being able to take it to the next level. So you decided to try and get some help.
Yeah.
And no, I totally get it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like you were kind of married to your job at that point, and you would have never really been able to take a vacation even.
Yeah. I mean, I still can't, like, even on our
Okay.
honeymoon in South of France, like I was still working every day because it's
Yeah,
just,
you
so
love it.
we have a full-time editor, Josh Weinberg, and then we have a practically full-time slash part-time copyright editor and journalist, Haley Moore, who's been amazing. She's like just been killing it for us. Josh and I are kind of like clones of each other. Like we kind of do the same thing. Like we're Josh is an exceptional photographer. He's great. He writes great reviews, does great event reportage. Like all this stuff is great. And then we manage a bunch of contributors and subcontractors that do work for us. We have like real salaries thanks to TBC. We have 401k. We have all this stuff that I couldn't do on my own.
Sure.
Part of the hardest part about being a small business owner is like asking for help. And I think that's the thing that I'm probably least accomplished at, is being able to tap out and be like, okay, I can't do this shit anymore by myself. And Carrie and I crunched numbers all the time before we sold to TPC, and it just wasn't possible to scale the business. And we had just kind of accepted the fact that
No, I
like
get it.
it's not going to grow; it's just going to stay.
I get it.
Yeah.
No, I
So,
totally get it. I mean,
but yeah,
in my little world, there's a point where you're like, you've seen this movie enough times where you're like, okay, I know where this is going.
yeah,
I know exactly where this is
yeah,
going.
yeah, and it's burnout.
Yeah.
that that's
Pain.
yeah. So,
What
but I mean,
can
it's been awesome. It's been tenuous. There's like obviously like trying to figure things out in a corporate framework is always going to be difficult when I've never had a corporate job, right? I worked at like architecture offices that had 4 people, but I've also learned the tools of the trade and like management and P&L reports and all these things that I think have like helped me understand like how companies become profitable and how they work. So
and
yeah,
I'm sure you've got some help too from the
yeah,
team.
yeah, which is great. Yeah.
Well, man, this was this was an awesome discussion. I really enjoyed diving into this stuff, and I think if I could, maybe another discussion we can have, maybe dive into some pockets in another time, because
Oh, totally.
I
Yeah.
love talking, and because like just especially with having updates on the market, what's happening in the market, I don't know, like e-bikes or just different things happening around. It's super interesting to get your take on it. But I really
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time today. Um, where can people find you and the Radavist? You want to just
Yeah. Yeah, it's www.theradavist.com. And then we're at The Radavist on Instagram. And then I'm at John Prolly on Instagram. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been great. And I can ramble and rant forever. So I appreciate the hour long window. This has been really fun. Yeah.
okay. Thanks, man. Take care.
Yep.